Recently, Donald Trump sent shockwaves through the entire NATO alliance by openly expressing his determination to take control of Greenland, even refusing to rule out the use of military force. This immediately triggered strong reactions from European allies, because Greenland is not an unclaimed territory, but part of Denmark's sovereign realm, a NATO member and a close ally of the United States. Put bluntly, if the U.S. were to deploy troops there, it would amount to a direct blow to the very alliance it leads. What worries many observers even more is that Trump is not the kind of person who speaks lightly. He has made bold and shocking decisions in the past, leading the international community to take every one of his statements seriously. As a result, when Trump spoke of Greenland in such a grave tone, quite a few NATO leaders began to feel deeply uneasy. However, the larger question remains: why would a sparsely populated, ice-covered island like Greenland be enough for Washington to risk a serious rupture with its allies? What makes Trump describe this place as vital to U.S. national security? When we look back at history, the answer gradually comes into focus. During the Second World War, after Denmark fell under German control in 1940, the United States swiftly moved into Greenland to prevent Nazi Germany from establishing weather stations and military bases there. It was during this period that Washington first recognized the island's unique strategic value. After the war, as the world entered a tense confrontation between rival blocs, Greenland suddenly became an indispensable link in America's defense against the Soviet Union. Because of this importance, the United States once offered to buy Greenland for a very large sum, but Denmark refused. Even so, the two sides reached an agreement allowing the U.S. to use the island for collective defense purposes. A defense treaty signed in the early 1950s paved the way for Washington to build an extremely important military base there. This base is one of the United States' most valuable strategic assets outside its national territory. The first reason Greenland is so critically important lies in its role in early warning against missile threats. Intercontinental ballistic missiles launched from Russia or northern parts of Asia toward the United States would typically pass over the Arctic. Deploying radar systems in Greenland allows Washington to detect such launches far earlier than stations located deep within the mainland, buying precious additional time to respond and intercept. With just a few extra minutes of preparation, the difference between catastrophe and safety could amount to millions of lives. Beyond that, the base in Greenland also plays a key role in space surveillance and satellite management. Thanks to its polar location, stations there can maintain frequent contact with satellites in polar orbit, something facilities at lower latitudes cannot do. This enables the United States to sustain control over reconnaissance and military navigation satellite systems, which form the backbone of modern defense technology. These factors alone are enough to explain why Greenland has long been on Washington's list of regions it considers too critical to ever fall into the hands of a rival. However, Greenland's importance goes far beyond purely military considerations. Seen from a broader perspective, Washington also views this ice-covered island as a source of economic and geostrategic advantages that could shape America's position for decades to come. One of the greatest concerns of the U.S. military since the Cold War has been the risk that Russian nuclear-armed missile submarines could quietly slip into the flagged Atlantic Ocean and move close to America's east coast. Geographically, to do so, submarines from Russia's Northern Fleet must pass through a narrow maritime corridor between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. This passage is widely regarded as the only gateway through which Russian submarines can reach the open ocean. As a result, controlling and monitoring the waters around Greenland allows the United States to closely track underwater movements, thereby reducing the risk of a surprise attack. Over many years, the United States has invested heavily in undersea surveillance systems, including patrol aircraft, seabed acoustic sensors, and other advanced reconnaissance platforms. These technologies have, in some cases, enabled Washington to locate distressed submarines that their own operators were unable to find. Today, as submarine technology becomes ever quieter and harder to detect, Maintaining strategic monitoring points like Greenland is even more critical. Without this link, America's ability to track and deter threats in the North Atlantic would be significantly weakened. Beyond military factors, Greenland has also drawn particular attention from U.S. leaders because of the vast resources believed to lie beneath its thick ice. At a time when global supply chains are increasingly shaped by strategic competition, rare earth elements have become among the world's most sensitive resources. They are essential materials for producing everything from fighter jets and nuclear submarines to high-precision guidance systems. At present, much of the world's capacity for rare earth extraction and processing is concentrated in China, a reality Washington views as a major national security risk. Within this context, Greenland stands out as a promising alternative. As surveys suggest, the island holds substantial reserves of several strategically important minerals. In addition to rare earths, Greenland is also believed to contain significant offshore oil and gas reserves. For many years, exploiting these resources was largely impractical due to harsh natural conditions and prohibitively high costs. However, climate change is causing ice to melt faster than expected, opening up access to oil and gas fields that previously existed only on paper. For an administration that places strong emphasis on energy security and conventional fuels, this represents a strategic reserve with long-term potential benefits. While Greenland's economic value may not yet be fully apparent, in the future, as extraction technologies advance and natural conditions continue to change, the island could well become a source of immense wealth. Another powerful factor that makes it impossible for the United States to ignore Greenland is China's increasingly visible presence in the Arctic. Beijing has announced plans to expand trade routes and investment in the region, viewing the Arctic as part of its long-term strategic vision. For Washington, this signals the risk of a strategic rival moving closer to what the U.S. considers its natural security perimeter. This concern is not merely speculative. It has already taken concrete form in an episode that put American officials on high alert. In the late 2010s, Greenland's government, which enjoys a high degree of self-rule, sought to attract investment to develop economic infrastructure and tourism. Plans were proposed to build new airports in order to open the island more fully to the world. Among the interested bidders was a major Chinese company with strong financial backing and extensive experience. This prospect immediately alarmed Washington. From a military perspective, airports in Greenland would not be purely civilian assets, but could also serve strategic purposes. If a company closely linked to the Chinese state were involved in building and operating them, the long-term implications would be impossible for the United States to ignore. Alongside this was the concern over financial dependence. If Greenland were to take on large loans for infrastructure projects, debt pressure could eventually force local authorities into political or economic concessions. For the United States, even a single scenario in which Greenland leaned toward a strategic rival would be enough to upset the security balance in the North Atlantic. This is why Washington applied strong pressure to block these sensitive projects, while at the same time promoting alternative solutions backed by its allies. That episode led Trump and many U.S. officials to confront a reality. Despite being part of the Western Alliance, Greenland retains significant autonomy. The United States cannot always control or swiftly influence every decision made by the island. In the event of conflicting interests, there is no guarantee that Greenland will consistently align with Washington's wishes. From a hard security perspective, this creates a long-term risk that the U.S. finds difficult to accept. For this reason, the idea of purchasing Greenland was put forward as a definitive solution to eliminate all potential uncertainties. If Greenland belonged to the United States, every issue from military and economic matters to long-term strategy would be fully under American control. However, this is an extremely difficult option to realize in practice. Not only would Denmark's consent be required, but more importantly, the people of Greenland themselves would have to approve it through a referendum. Any use of force, even if it brought quick results, would inevitably carry severe political consequences and shake the entire NATO alliance. In the end, the Greenland story illustrates a direct collision between national interests, alliance politics, and global strategic competition. For the United States, this is not just a distant island, but a pivotal piece on the chessboard of 21st century power. Which path Washington will ultimately choose to pursue its objectives remains an open question. And the world can only wait to see how the next chapter unfolds.